This founder believes robotics is going to be mainstream and as big as the smartphone market much sooner than people think because of gaming. Make some noise for Michael, Isakov, and RoboDuel. This founder believes online sports betting will evolve into a common and accepted household event that is as commonplace as lottery ticket purchases and just as accessible. The taboo will be replaced by gamification, pro league partnerships, and progressive technology. Give it up for Kelly Brooks and Cofounder. Thank you, founders, for those introductions. Let's kick it over to our head referee, Nick.
We are in the final four for the sports startup debate competition, and this is the finalist for the esports and gaming and the sports betting and gambling sections. And we have two amazing founders, Kelly and Michael, and they're ready to debate to figure out who's going to go to the championship. So, welcome, founders. Let's get ready to debate. And to kick things off, we're going to do a coin flip to determine who will answer the first question. So, Michael, would you like heads or tails?
Heads.
Heads. It is heads. So would you like to receive the first question or defer?
Defer.
So each of you will have 45 seconds to answer uninterrupted, and then the other opponent will have 45 seconds to answer uninterrupted. You can go back and forth. Best of luck to the both of you. Let's put 10 minutes on the clock and kick things off with the first question. So, number one. The art of addressing different priorities with limited resources key to a successful startup. What issue facing the business environment today is most important, and how are you addressing it? Some examples could be environmental, climate change, diversity, wage gaps, cybersecurity, geopolitics, or low employment.
Yeah, so all of these issues, these global issues, are really important. And the beauty of a startup is that we have a clean slate and we can incorporate these issues of ethics and compliance right from the get-go. We have a clean slate. And as a startup, we're running lean, so it's a lot less costly to integrate from the get-go. At quarter four, for example, we're really passionate about the environment, and we're really passionate about diversity and non-discrimination in the workplace. For under $1,000, we were able to implement both of these into our policies and our processes. For example, work from home. We do work from home to reduce carbon footprint. I called my lawyer. He's a startup lawyer. He wrote up a work from home policy in less than 48 hours for under $100. I put those out to my employees. They gave me the feedback. We had them signed up in 48 hours, and within 2 weeks after implementing, our infrastructure, we were all working from home to reduce carbon footprint. Number two,
Michael, answer his right there.
Okay. Yeah, so obviously the COVID crisis has like one of the biggest impacts right now. But for us at RoboDuels, and I think for the United States at large, one of the looming geopolitical kind of threats or things that is like very, very relevant to businesses, not only governments, is the rise of China. So if you look at the top robotics companies in the world and investments in the world, that's in the past 5 years all been happening in China. Robotics has not just an application in gaming like what we're doing, but also outside of gaming, especially in the military and actual international politics and power. So if the United States doesn't make this change, the United States is going to start falling behind in robotics. China is known as the hardware capital of the world because of all the manufacturing that's there. So we really need to step it up as our business. And what we've done at RoboDuels is bring robotics to the United States. And make it accessible to everyone in the United States. So we can build a whole new generation of kids growing up who are literate in robotics, and so that the United States remains competitive within this high-tech space.
I agree with the geopolitical thing. What I was going to say as well is diversity lends itself to this, because diversity, you're building a team that can actually interact globally, as well as build a very competitive product within North America. So for example, for diversity, workplace harassment, and other things, what we did really inexpensively was bring in a specialist to train my team within 6 hours to understand how important diversity was, which also, like I said, addresses the geopolitical piece. If we have a global team, it really helps us navigate geopolitical issues. But we brought in a specialist within 6 hours. My team was trained on diversity, workplace harassment and discrimination, again, for under $100. All of my employees took some tests, got certified, so now we're empowered from the environmental side as well as from the diversity and workplace harassment side as well.
Yeah, so the United States and like US companies don't really have as much of a problem with diversity as countries around the world. We are one of the most diverse nations in the world, and we're successful because of that. The matter that happens with
but you know what?
No, excuse me. I'll let you finish. Excuse me.
I
so
tell you, not everyone.
If you want to make, if I want to make a PCB, or I want to make a robot, or I want to make something in the United States that has anything to do with hardware, I want to start a hardware company, I need to go out and raise $10 million because it costs so much to get things done here. If you live in China, if you're growing up in China, all you have to do is go to Shenzhen. You just pick something out from the marketplace. It's like an all-you-can-eat buffet. You can get anything that you want and build anything that you want super fast with super low turnaround. That's why the top robotics companies in the world are coming out of there. And not only the top robotics companies, but the top manufacturing companies. They're copying all of our IP. And so many companies in the United States, even apparel companies, are so dependent on China. So that dependency, although it's good, it's like kind of an international thing, there are lots of geopolitical threats that are rising right now outside of the business world, and they're going to affect the business world. So as a business, what we want to do is make sure that not only, first we're able to take care of ourselves at home, so our country, and make sure that the kids growing up in the United States and the consumers of the United States are able to access very competitive manufacturing goods and also robotics goods, and kind of grow up learning more about this high-tech space and be able to be competitive.
But if you implement diversity, I have immigrant visa students working on my team from China. I have to go back to the point that you said the United States is very diverse and you're great at practicing diversity. We're not great at practicing diversity. Trust me, I'm a female founder in a male-dominated space. We need to implement diversity, and it's going to gradually answer some of these questions. I've got some brilliant people on my team who are naturally from this area. One of them specifically is from China, and he is helping us build out this really robust platform, based on some of his knowledge and experience from being, within China itself. So again, I agree with you that geopolitics is an issue, but I don't agree that diversity has been addressed, and we need to address it to make our companies more robust.
Yeah. I'm saying relatively internationally. United States still have a lot of problems here. Like there are places in the United States that are not diverse. So we made our company very international. We have people from all around the world who live in America who will work with us. We're from Brooklyn. So I myself come from an immigrant family. But what I'm saying is, for us to remain competitive, for businesses to remain competitive in the US, China is probably the biggest kind of thing, the biggest kind of almost threat to that. And that's not anything that they're doing to us. It's more like what they're doing that we're not doing. Okay. So what I'm saying is we have to step it up ourselves and, have our own capability on the level of China. Otherwise they're going to become the innovator and the leader within a huge sector of the entire marketplace as a whole throughout multiple categories. And it's kind of we have to remain competitive, and that is kind of the biggest thing going on in the world that I think American businesses should be concerned about.
So great. We'll move on to the next question. So, how would you manage a client that represents 60% of your business, but as you scale, takes up 80% of your resources? So, with that, Michael, you'd be the first one to answer that question.
Yeah. So, kind of a lot of assuming you're running a very lean organization and you've done the best you can to try to cut costs, really it comes down to the fundamentals of business, which is trust and relationships and being just a trustworthy business partner. So if you have a product, if you're a startup, you're probably made some great innovation and you have a client that really you're serving at a very competitive price because you really want that first customer. Now, if that customer is costing you money, it's a simple matter of supply and demand. You have to be upfront, transparent with your client, bring them the data and tell them, hey, we're providing you this great service, we provide it at a great price. It's really competitive, you won't get it in many other places at the level that we provide, but it's costing us money and we can't really continue to operate this way, so we're just gonna have to raise the price a little bit. And it's still going to be a super competitive price, but you have to be transparent with your client. You have to work with your client. And what we've done is robo-duels with our first clients.
Michael,
Sure.
Before you explain even more, we'll let Kelly have her point.
So I agree that the revenue is one of the issues with this client. This is my second tech startup. I've dealt with these client types before. As a CEO, I've got to go back to the vision of my company and my roadmap. This client, we call them a roadblocker client. Initially, they were important to the vision, but now they're hindering it. So some of the issues with this client is, number one, they halt progression because all of a sudden you become a service agency putting out fires instead of a product development company, and it can really hinder the valuation of your company. And as well as the revenue, which you've mentioned, Michael, it affects employee morale. You've hired a development team to come in and build the best, and all of a sudden they're putting out fires at all times during the day because this client is hogging, your team's services. So what you have to do, number one, you need to prevent this from happening. You need to diversify your revenue. You need to diversify your client base. It's a risky revenue model to have one client that is bringing in 60% of your revenue. All your eggs in one basket. It's very dangerous. If they leave tomorrow, your company is in big trouble. So you need to either put a diversified revenue model into place right off the bat, or if this does happen to you, you pivot quickly, you focus on sales, you bring in additional clients, so the client is no longer as important. And if this first client doesn't eventually match the vision that you're trying to achieve, you need to transition out the client, be transparent, let them know why, or charge more money.
Yeah, absolutely. So, totally on board with that. That's like, you have to focus on what you're doing the best. What we've done as an early stage startup, since what we do is so innovative, like we connect people to robots in real time, people can't really get that in many other places. Even Zoom or Skype would have to hire extra engineers to connect them to robots and get the video transmitted and all that stuff. So what we've done is pretty amazing. So when we have a client, we try to be super good on customer service. And then when we have to raise the price, we're very transparent with that. And we actually charge a quite high price for our service because, if we're licensing this out, we can assume that this can happen. So we have to get compensated for that. Otherwise, no one wants to fall in that trap where your customer is costing you more. So either you have to charge a lot more or just not get into that position in the first place.
Yeah, agree. And transparency comes through, initial client meetings, really understanding the value of your organization. Quarter four is the same thing. For us, there's not a lot of people in this space who are able to integrate an AI infrastructure right into the back end of their systems. So right from the get-go, we need to prove the value of quarter four, why we're going to charge them the price that we are, and obviously service the client really well, but in a year and a half, make a really tough decision if this initial client, isn't matching the vision of the company and the roadmap of the company, and my stakeholders are all of a sudden upset because this client is monopolizing everything that we're doing. So some tough decisions eventually have to be made in a respectful way, but hopefully, again, you can from the get-go put policies into place to prevent this from happening.
Great, we'll move on to the third question. So, what is the most important role for a founder when scaling a company and why? It could be day-to-day operations, recruiting, customer service, fundraising, product development, or is it something else? And Kelly, that would be 45 seconds for you starting now.
Okay. We hear a million times over and over that a CEO wears many hats. When the company is scaling, I like to say that the CEO has to turn into the hat manufacturer and the hat distributor. One of the most important roles that won't change for me while I'm a CEO is that I have to mandate the vision of the company and the product roadmap. I have to make sure that that's happening because I need to, answer to my stakeholders at all times. Eventually, as the company grows, there's going to be so much noise around me that I won't be able to focus. So what I need to do is communicate my vision and that product map to a leadership team, and that leadership team is going to dilute some of that noise that's happening around me so I can continue to focus. So for me, the most important role of a CEO during scaling times is building the leadership team, training the leadership team, and reducing the noise so that I can continue forging the path of my product and my company.
Michael, your 45 seconds.
Yeah, so CEO and a founder of a company, whether you're scaling or not, there's one objective. That is to multiply shareholder value. When you're scaling in particular, the biggest problem that you have to avoid is your company being internal strife within the company. The greatest empires fall from within. So as the founder and CEO, you have to really communicate the vision and recruiting is the most important thing. You have to hire the people that are completely aligned with the vision, highly skilled, but they have to believe in what you're doing. And they have to follow your leadership, okay? Because you have people who want to go on their own and stuff, but you have to have people who are completely aligned with you, because that leadership team is going to go out and hire people, okay? And if they hire people that are not aligned with your company and not aligned with your vision, then your company is going to start to fall apart from the inside. So those early hires that you make, those founders, those co-founders that you bring on, those first employees, they're super important to building this culture that kind of forces new hires to adopt the vision. So if someone is not down with the vision, they won't be hired. You have to have that structure in place. And as the founder and CEO, you have to be on top of that and make sure that's happening. Also, you don't want to hire too many people because one of the problems that happens is, a company is just a collection of people. A company will raise money and all of a sudden they'll have a ton of people come on, and then 3 months later, 6 months later, half of them will be gone. You need to hire only when it's absolutely necessary and do so in a very measured way. And that's just an organizational architecture that you have to set up in the very beginning. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I just want to really, you brought up trust, Michael. That's really important. The other thing that a CEO has to do with that trust is they have to delegate. Delegating, this is my second company. My first company, I learned that, I wanted to hoard, I wanted to protect. But as a CEO, you need to, again, hire the right people, hire a trusting team, aligned with the vision, and you need to be able to delegate to those people, check in, make sure they're doing, everything correctly that's in alignment with the vision. But you have to have some disruptors as well that might challenge, that might think outside the box, and that's important too. But again, it all comes back to trust, to leadership, training the team properly, and making sure the vision's there so that your stakeholders get the highest return on value.
Yeah, it really comes down to alignment. Obviously, you need to have everyone on the same page, and obviously you want, if you're going to have an army of lions led by a sheep is always going to lose to a lion led by a lion leading an army of sheep. So yeah, you want the disruptors and all that stuff, but you need alignment. And those early hires that you make, they're going to delegate for you that alignment. So it's not the CEO and founder who's going on and micromanaging every single person. What you're doing is at the very beginning, when you have the control, because as the organization grows, the CEO, the founder loses control, believe it or not. When you have the control in the small phase, you want to bring on those people that are going to secure that control as you go forward. And that's why making your early hires is so important, and building that leadership team out. So you can delegate all you want.
I don't agree that a CEO always loses control. I think there's always ways to ensure that doesn't happen. I think sometimes we're doing too much and we might lose vision and we might lose our finger on the pulse. But as a good CEO, you bring those leaderships back in, the leadership team back in, you rally to ensure that control is still being kept within the management offices.
The beginning of the company is the most important part, because the stronger the stem, the stronger the branches. So yeah, you can say you'll never lose control, but if you have a company with 10,000 people, hire 10,001, you're not going to be in control over. Okay, that's going to be that's going to be a decision that you made 5 years ago that is going to impact whether or not that person has a role. They know what they're doing, they believe in the company, they believe in the vision, and they're going to add value to the company. So you have.
It does happen 5 years ago, but nobody's irreplaceable either. Somebody on your core leadership team that you hired 5 years ago, you can replace them to ensure that they're continuing to help you keep control.
You can live in the world of hypotheticals, but you could have been a $100 million company, but you're a $10 million company. You could have been if you just made that decision. I mean, you can go on and on with these hypotheticals, but really, if you just stick to the fundamentals, you make good long-term decisions that are totally aligned with the vision of your company and the alignment, and kind of like, how are you going to multiply shareholder value? Not add to it, multiply it, because that's your job. So the way to do that is by really hiring the right people in the beginning that are going to take your company there. And because at some point you're not going to be able to do everything. You're going to be making the key decisions that are going to like help the business, but your business could be way more efficient, way more successful if you don't make these mistakes. So it's like as you scale, it becomes less about, you already have product market fit. It's more about making less mistakes than it is about like more big hits, because you're going to make the big hits over time, and that's going to be you as a leader kind of making the right decisions. But like for your general, whatever you're doing, you have to make as little mistakes as possible in order for your company to be successful.
And if you make mistakes, you have to have the team that's going to pivot with you quickly to, run back those mistakes. So I think your leadership team, again, I think we are saying one of the same things is you need to hire well, hire smartly, but be ready to pivot. No one's irreplaceable. The CEO wears many hats, and they have to have a leadership team around them that's going to help diffuse the noise to help the CEO continue to make the vision and the company a lot more valuable to every stakeholder.
Yeah, I mean, perseverance is also a very important cultural factor to implement within the key hires that you make initially. And it's a matter of literally never give up and hit and don't get hit. It's it's kind of like the sweet science. So
that's a good segue to let's do an overtime question. Well, you'll each have one response uninterrupted, and it should be a good segue. So overtime question would be, what personality traits do you think are most important to have on the team when making your early hires? So Michael, you're kind of segueing into that point, but you're 45 seconds for...
Yeah, so if you're in a very early stage, you're hiring your first employees, these are people that are down with you in the trenches. This is before maybe you even have your first customer, and you're just building out a product, you're doing market interviews, you're doing the whole gamut, right? You're trying to get to product market fit, and that takes an immense amount of energy. Every single company that has ever done anything has taken an immense amount of energy to create. So you need someone who has not only aligns with your vision like we've been talking about, but has a tremendous amount of perseverance. Now, how are you going to get someone to take lower pay, to take some equity on, and to work 10 to 12-hour days alongside you in a rag shack office or in a garage and try to build the next big thing? That person has to believe in what they're doing, and they have to believe that what they're doing is going to lead to something successful. They have to believe in your company. So kind of that's one of the first major roles that you have to do as a CEO, and find those people that align with your company. So you don't want to hire...
That's more than... So Kelly, your response would be?
Yeah, so I mean, grit and determination, that's proven right now through COVID-19. My team persevered, just like what Michael said, extremely important. I think another really big key, this is my second company, with Q4, my team, they're not afraid of ambiguity. You can't over-process the process. If you have too many people adhering to process all the time, you don't get anything done. So during a stressful time, they can't be coming to me and saying, what's the priority and how do I do this? They need to be able to take direction that aligns with the company vision, like what Michael was saying, and take that grit, take that determination, take the passion because they're so in love with the product, and get on with it. I can't be bothered to have a million questions asked about one task and why aren't the processes, developed already. You just need to run with it. You need to be the entrepreneur of your own domain. And as well, these people need to be mitigated risk takers. They need to have the confidence to take risks, but they can't go rogue. So you need to have people with confidence that can, think outside the box, but don't go down a rogue pathway that's going to cost my company a lot of money because they decided that they were going to take on, their own feature development. So that's also another piece. And collaboration. All of this doesn't work without collaboration amongst your team members. If you have a toxic team member, they can drag down that team extremely rapidly. and then everything can really come to an abrupt halt, and you have to make some real decisions fast that impact everything. So that's what I feel.
All right, that's a great way to end things off. Well thought out debate between Kelly and Michael. Use the hashtag #DebateForCovid. Let us know who you think won that round. If you haven't already, please donate to our pledging campaign to support CDP COVID-19 Relief Fund. And now we're going to go to the judges for their analysis and picks to decide who will go to the championship round.
Now let's introduce our judges. First up, Teddy Blank, principal at First Star Ventures. Next, Sebastian Gros, director of portfolio at Lead Sports. And lastly, AJ Vaynerchuk, co-founder at Vayner Media and Vayner Sports. Let's kick it over to our head referee, Nick.
All right, that wraps up an amazing debate for the Final Four for the esports versus the sports betting. Well thought out debate by Michael and Kelly. And now we are on to the judges for their analysis and picks. So to get things kicked off, Teddy, could you please provide your analysis followed by your pick?
Yeah, happy to. I thought there was a lot of really interesting back and forth between these guys. And I'll just jump in, the first question about, kind of limited resources and picking, these kind of key global issues to focus on. I thought they both had really interesting points. I think one thing that Michael hit on that was, taking advantage of the moment we're in is, there are going to be geopolitical tailwinds that make it advantageous to build a competitive industry company in the U.S. And I think he's positioning himself to take advantage of that for sure. It's up to us as a country to compete, education at that stuff at an early age. He made a point about that being kind of crucial and finding ways to get kids engaged in that type of stuff, just to be competitive as a country. But I do think I actually liked Kelly's answer here a little better, talking about, diversity of thought and how, a diverse team can really drive global competition within a company. And I really do think that that's a little bit more of a broadly applicable lesson is that, getting diversity of thought on the team can allow you to tackle a lot of different challenges in creative ways. And I think Kelly took that question for my money there. And then moving on to the second question, this one is interesting because there's a lot of different ways to approach this in terms of, having a kind of a large client who's giving you some issues, especially early on. I think Kelly wins this question for me because, she's focusing on the things you can really control here, which is, diversifying revenue, focusing on sales, kind of building yourself a base to de-risk that large client. And then she also made a comment that, I think takes some maturity to make, which is that, look, if a customer no longer matches the vision, tough decisions have to be made. You might have to cut someone loose. And I think Mike is he's on point here with, look, be honest and open and see if they'll take a price increase. But at the end of the day, you can't really control that. And I like that Kelly was focused on the things that she can control. For question 3, the founder's role as you scale. I think this is one where, Kelly has a little bit of an interesting perspective as a second-time founder, and the note about, reducing noise for her and learning to delegate and kind of, learning what she can own and what she can't is something that it sounds like it's coming from someone who's lived that before. I do think this one, though, actually, Michael had a really interesting point that the leadership team you hire is going to multiply themselves, right? They'll each multiply themselves 10x over the life of the company, even early on. And, A players hire A players, B players hire C players. And so I think his focus on recruiting as the single most important thing, I would totally agree with there. And then just moving on briefly to the overtime question, because this one, again, I think Kelly, as a second-time founder, had probably had a better answer for this question for my money in that, she's looking for folks who are entrepreneurial themselves. And that was the quality she really hired for, it seems. I think they were both, vision alignment, perseverance, grit, determination. I think they were both on the same page there, but she kind of took it a step further and said, I'm looking for people who have, confidence and creativity, without rogue behavior. And I think that describes a very entrepreneurial mentality that she seems to be hiring for on her team. And so I think it's, they had very, very interesting and different perspectives on these questions. And at the end of the day, I think I got to go with Kelly. She was, really clear and has clearly given a lot of thought to this stuff, in between companies and with her new endeavor. And, I think that's the second time founder advantage that she brought to this is, she's learned a lot of these hard lessons in real life.
Great. Thank you for that, Teddy. So we have one vote for Kelly, and now we're going to move on to our next judge, Sebastian, for your vote and analysis.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think, like Teddy said, it was a pretty interesting debate centered around 4 key questions here. So starting with the first question and the challenges in the workplace and the ability to address them. I think Kelly overall did a better job at taking an issue here and how it was concretely addressed in the workplace. I like the idea of taking real life examples, the fact that she was talking about the training that she implemented, that she was working closely with lawyers and that sort of things when it comes to like climate change, environmental considerations and diversity in the workplace. Michael had a good point around, which was more geopolitical and more holistic to my perspective, and the impact of China and competition in robotic space and the fact that there was overall risk of the US falling behind. I think, although it's a very interesting point, I'm going to go with Kelly on that one because I also felt from a presenting perspective that Michael was pushing a little bit to the side the point that Kelly was trying to make around diversity, which I think as an investor, I would probably see it as a bit of a red flag. So I would be careful with saying, for instance, that diversity is not a huge issue in the US. Or, I mean, I put myself in the shoes of someone who was listening to the debate straight through without doing it again and again, just first impression. And it kind of gave me the impression that it was kind of pushing me to the side, that it was not a huge issue, which I think it's a bit instrumental to his speech. What I would have liked to see a bit more is obviously we're going through a major crisis at the moment, and I know everyone is talking about it and probably trying to not talk too much about it every day, every second, but I would like to understand concretely what sort of how these guys are addressing the current crisis of COVID and the impact it has on the business, because I think it's a very important point to make and to see how they thrive, or also addressing different challenges at this stage and how they concretely take action to mitigate the risk. But overall, I would go with Kelly on that one. For the second question around the client and the allocation of resources, I liked Mike's approach here with the idea of building the trust and the relationship, which as a short-term solution enables you to eventually be more in the control. And here I'm kind of going against what Teddy is saying, but I think it's a different opinion, although I agree with some points he's making. But I like the idea of building on this full transparency and being able to build this trust and have the pricing exercise done with the key client, because I think eventually this is something that should be down to service and customer service. And if you feel like you have the appropriate relationship with these clients, it's important that you can have these tough talks with them. But Kelly's making very good points, but I think they were just a little bit more too prospective in terms of diversifying revenue model, and I wanted something a bit more concrete here. So I would go with Michael on that one. So after 2 questions, we've got a bit of a tie, and I think where Kelly really made the difference for me was on question 3 and the overtime question. Again, fully agree with what Teddy's saying on the idea that she's a second-time founder. Starting with the question 3, what is the most important role of a founder when scaling? I like the idea of where she starts, where she's like, okay, we need to convey the vision, we need to be able to build a leadership team, in order to dilute the noise, with an ability to delegate and being able to think outside the box, challenge ideas, no status quo, and the ability to pivot if necessary, which I really agree with. Michael was focusing, the first sentence he said was that the absolute necessity was to multiply shareholder value. which I think is a bit tricky to say, although no one is going to argue against that, because eventually this is kind of something that everyone is hoping for. But I think he was kind of taking the question the other way around. He should have probably focused a bit more on concrete actions and traits of a founder that are important in order to multiply the shareholder value. So I think that was better addressed by Kelly from that perspective. And when it comes to the overtime question and the key traits of personality on a team to have early on, I like Michael's point about energy, perseverance, and you need to believe, because you want someone to be motivated to be able to join a company at a lower salary, convince them on the equity structure, and be able to still work day in, day out, 12 hours a day. But I think, again, Kelly was more concrete, and it's probably spoke more from experience, which, again, is back to the point that she's a second-time founder, and all around having great determination, not being afraid of ambiguity, being able to take a direction and get on with things, and still being able to challenge while providing a focus to the team to not go rogue. I think it really tells a story, and I think I like the way she articulated this answer. It felt just a bit more experienced from my perspective. So I'd say overall, Kelly, based on that, I would give it 3 points, and Michael would end up with 1. So Kelly will be my winner.
Great, thank you for that, Sebastian. So that's 2 out of 3 votes, and that's enough to go to the championship for Kelly. But we still have one more judge, so I'm going to toss it over to you, AJ, for your unique perspective to share insight and your pick.
Yeah, I'll keep this fairly brief. I think Teddy and Sebastian covered a lot of the points that I wanted to make, and have illustrated a lot of the details of the debate, and it was a really good one. So I'm going to try to find some unique and new aspects to add, and it might be brief, but at least better than redundant. So on question 1, I really appreciate Kelly's point about the fact that everybody in this competition is a startup. And so for these types of key issues, it's a really great opportunity to start with them right away and make them a priority and a focus initially, as opposed to being a big company that's old and stodgy and slow moving and trying to fix it through throwing money at the solution or hiring somebody with a fancy title. So just really like that overall point. And I thought her focus on the topic, a little bit to what Teddy said, I think it was a little bit more at the center of what she was focused on as a founder, whereas I thought Michael maybe pushed it to the side a little bit. And I felt like even the geopolitical aspect of his business and his perspective, that's a little bit more of a result of being successful as a business, as opposed to a centered thesis of what they're trying to accomplish. On question 2, so I gave that one to Kelly. On question 2, I gave this one to Kelly as well. Her answer about diversifying revenue is near and dear to my heart. My first business as a founder was in client services, and it was always something that we saw other folks in the industry fail at, where they got fired by a major client and then their business crumbled. So we always held the diversification of revenue very high. And so that point alone really took it away from me. While I appreciated Michael's point about building deep relationships and transparency with conversations, I've actually done that plenty of times. And even then, the end result is, I love you, you're great, that was super transparent, but that doesn't work for me, so now what? So I thought somebody made the point before that it's a little bit more in her control than I think Michael's answer is a little bit more in the control of the customer. Because no matter how transparent and deep the relationship is, there's still business at the end of the day that may prevent a customer from severing ties. So I gave that one to Kelly. On question 3, and this format's following Teddy's a little bit, he and I were really in lockstep, I think, in our interpretation. I gave this one to Michael. I just thought that his answer as far as most important role of the founder, I think and I didn't realize this in the first business that I started, but I realized it more so years down the line, and even with other business that I started. If your core focus is multiplying shareholder value, the rest can take care of itself. Because if you're not increasing the value of the business and increasing the quality of the product or the service, you're going to run into issues that you can't solve, because at the core, that's so important. So while I agreed with so much of what Kelly said, I just think Michael's answer hit the nail on the head here and gave him the slight edge on that one. And then lastly, going to the overtime question, I think Kelly's answer of finding employees that are more entrepreneurial and less afraid of ambiguity. It allows them to move faster. And so I think speed is so important. I thought Michael's answers, while vital, I think were almost customary and kind of no-brainers, so to speak. And I think Kelly's answer kind of packaged that, but then added in this other detailed nuance that I think really separated it. So at the end of the day, I think it was a very good debate, but I gave it Kelly 3-1 and Kelly overall.
Great. Thank you for that, AJ. And congratulations, Kelly. You just got a ticket to the championship, which will be this Thursday on the 21st at 5 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you, Teddy, Sebastian, and AJ, for that amazing analysis. For our founders, please use the hashtag debate for COVID, and please donate to the Pledge It campaign to support CDP COVID-19.